Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived entirely to let me spend more time with interesting people than I would ever get on the radio. Toby Jones, welcome.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Talk about the planets aligning from an actor's point of view. In the last 10 days, I've watched the conclusion of The Hack, in which, of course, you play Alan Rosbridger. Yeah. And I've watched you as Iago in Othello at the Haymarket with David Harewood. Yeah. And last night I watched Mr. Burton, beautiful, beautiful film about the teacher who essentially set Richard Burton upon the path to fame and fortune. I think in the last 10 days I've seen more of you, Toby Jones, than I have of my wife.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's been an unalloyed pleasure.
I'm not in charge of scheduling.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is that for civilians, it's weird. They'd be like, how many hours are there in your day?
Yeah, I think people think that these things are done consecutively and you're working all the time to put this stuff out. But
you are in a fairly purple patch.
Yes, I don't want to put the hex on this interview straight away, but any sense of I'm kind of superstitious about seeing any kind of like a purple patch suggests that there's some. It's all going very well, and it's all
could be
people
fine.
Talking, it'll be fine now, and I'm not sure that's terribly healthy for an actor to feel ever.
No.
You sort of feel you don't ever really want to arrive anywhere.
Oh, I like that. Let's begin at the beginning. Briefly in Hammersmith, I think, but you grew up in Oxford.
Yeah, I always say I'm from near Oxford, a town called Charlbury. That's where I spent my formative years from about the age of 9 to when I went away to university. And, so originally literally born in London and then whisked out into the country.
And a happy home?
Let's get right into that. Very, very, very happy home. It's an interesting question, is it? Because you spend the rest of your life reinterpreting your childhood, rediscovering it from the different perspective you have on it, without wishing to. I know the title is Happy Home, but it's a big question.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I scanned the notes before I sat down with you. I always scan them once and then read them properly the second time. And I did a double take when I read that you'd been in The Elephant Man with David Lynch, because I thought, bloody hell, he's not that old, is he? But no. This, of course, this was your father, Freddie. Yeah, you came from a family of actors, where both parents were thespians.
Yes. On my mother's side, my dad was a first-generation actor who basically got enrolled into drama school by his girlfriend because he was so lost trying to be a poet as a 29-year-old in Stoke-on-Trent, not fitting in the early 1960s. And she basically revealed to him that he wasn't a poet. He was, in fact, probably an actor. And
he was playing the part of a poet.
Exactly, which he did. But and as a consequence, I think he was forever grateful for becoming an actor. And it saved him and his mental health and everything. Whereas on my mother's side, I've recently discovered that it literally goes back to people pulling carts around in the 17th century, like travelling players.
Wow.
Yeah, which is quite extraordinary. And having always been rather ambivalent about becoming an actor in the first place, that romance, as it were, of that story has reconciled me a bit more with what I do. I feel an unexpected surge of pride to be linked in some way to that kind of background.
Of course.
Which I didn't feel before, because actors literally go back generation by generation back to that time.
That's incredible. Did you discover this as an amateur, or were you doing one of those television programmes?
No, I did a show on Channel 4 called My Grandparents' War, where I'm normally I've normally said no to most documentary stuff just because I feel slightly compromised by having to reveal a version of who I am. Yeah. A bit like this. But they said, we've done research into your grandparents and what they happened to them in the war, and we think there's a program there. I said, what have you found out? And they said, well, you have to do the show.
Oh, clever.
And then you get the and it was through that I began to find out, really.
That's magic, isn't it? That
Yeah.
sense of that. I mean, a sense of coming home almost, or a sense of completion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I grew up feeling, watching my dad when he wasn't working and going, whatever happens, I've got to avoid that. And I've got to avoid this sense of being at the whim of the world. That I don't ever want to feel desperate about my job. And yet there is something about the adults I meet from this world who are so interested and engaged with people, who are interested in people, whether they're children or old people, anyone, that the actors I met, and I thought, why wouldn't I want to spend time with those people? But I don't know that I want to be an actor. And so I think at first I did question the terms under which I thought I would end up in the business, but maybe not as an actor.
Okay. And I don't think it was a home through which the great and the good used to troop, is it? It didn't.
Well, yeah. I mean, my dad was very. I mean, he had an extraordinary career. Really, he made about 90 movies, and he made various friends. And if you mean great and the good, by that you mean stars, then I think that there were people along the way. I remember I did a show called The Play What I Wrote about 20 years ago, and Roger Moore came to do it. And all he wanted to do was talk about my father and talk about how much he adored my father, because they'd done a picture called The Man Who Haunted Himself. And they'd sort of stayed loosely in touch ever since. And so there was a connection, even if my dad kept his work pretty much in work, and we weren't carted off to sets or anything. But yeah, a Sting, for example. My dad was in Dune with Sting, and Sting also did The Play What I Wrote, and he said, "Oh, your dad and I met each other in Newcastle because your dad would come on with a saucepan and drum with the Newcastle City Band that I was playing bass with at the time." So there were these weird connections.
Wow.
Going back to the 60s and 70s that I've subsequently discovered about my dad's sort of private life, effectively.
I mean, were you conscious of the glamour then, you and your brothers, if he wasn't really bringing work home with him? Did you realise that it was quite different from what all your friends' dads were doing?
Yeah, I think partly because, I mean, it was just normal to me, but I think it was more what people project onto your life, how they assume your life is. And I think that what I found glamorous, in a way it's still what I find glamorous, is the idea of a parallel time zone that one is working in, that one gets, a car comes at 4 a.m. to take you to somewhere. No one would know where you are. You then move into a different time zone to film the film you're filming, and no one could sort of. It's why I'm sort of slightly phobic about having my mobile phone with me when I'm at work, because it sort of feels like I'm saying goodbye to the most romantic thing about my job by having my phone with me. So I love that aspect of it. And I remember watching my dad being driven off and thinking, there's something about that I really love, this idea of being taken away. A bit like when you saw people bowing at the end of a show and disappearing, and you wonder, where do they go now that they've, as a child, that those sort of things, I think, had a big impact.
Like a sort of liminal space.
Yeah.
Like you're moving into, stepping out of the quotidian.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah, of course. I'd never thought of it.
I think it's why I like Test cricket.
Yes.
Is that you have this sense of sort of undefined time going on and on, that a sport just goes on, and you could check in and out of it. And I love those things.
Primary school, I suppose. Next, were you a good student? Did you excel? There must have been lots of books in the house. It must have been quite.
What there was reverence for words. There was a lot of reverence. My father, all his life, could. He had that thing that I watched a thing with Richard Burton, who had these tracts of poetry that he had, and my dad had tracts of poetry in his head that he just knew, because they were kind of life-saving, I think, for that generation. I think that they were introduced to text, and I think for them it was this whole new way, an escape from the, as you say, the quotidian world into language. And certainly my father had that. He wasn't a big reader, but he was a big he would learn poems, and he would listen to a lot of classical music, and there was a lot of that going on, and jazz, and there was a lot of that. So there was culture in that sense. But books, I remember when we moved to Oxford that my friends' parents were all academics at the university. And I was suddenly struck by how little I knew about anything, and how much I had to be cool. You had to suddenly gen up, because they all had this effortless intelligence. So I spent quite a lot of time panicking and mugging up and falling in love with books, really.
Gosh. And you were a chorister, I think. You went to Christchurch Cathedral School.
Are you getting your info here?
Is that not true?
Yeah, I was a chorister. Yeah.
So parents sent you privately. So you went to prep school.
They did. My mum, I would say, sent us privately.
She was the driving force here. She'd given up a successful acting career, really, to raise you and your brother.
Yeah, in a very in a way that I think she looks back now and wonders why she had done
Very
that.
much of the era,
yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
But she could have had a long and flourishing career as well, I sense. Do you remember school? Apart from the kind of early intellectual insecurity, was it a happy experience?
It was a great experience. I loved the people I met there, these friends that I met, and I grew to love learning, and I was very fortunate that I had, what one always dreams of, having 2 or 3 teachers who change your life. And I had those people, and particularly in things like English and theology. I had teachers who changed my view of everything and got me interested in areas that I wouldn't have studied otherwise. But also, I think the people, the students that were there were so. It was a very smart school, and I was inspired to study by what my peer group seemed to know, and that sort of continues today. Really,
you're quite blessed then to not have had to endure that kind of. It's uncool to want to know stuff.
Being cool was wearing it lightly.
Yeah, of course, and you did.
I didn't. They did.
But you aspired to.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned that conversations at home would be quite philosophical as well. That you would talk. Your parents would be talking about consciousness and heavy duty stuff like that.
Did I say that somewhere? What I'd say?
It's all on the record, Toby. You can't disown any of this.
This is why I should avoid these shows. No, what I would say is that having this band of friends that I had, whose parents I think were academics, I think when they came to my house, they met, as I've mentioned, people who were interested in them as people and wanted to know what they thought about things and what motivated them, because they were actors and they're interested and engaged with people.
Yes.
This I found incredibly embarrassing, because I loved going to their houses where you would learn about history or physics or whatever, and their parents they weren't particularly interested in hearing about what you felt about anything. They were just interested in about what you thought about stuff. And so I think that there was that sense of not embarrassed, but it was more, there's an interest in why people do what they do.
Yeah. And
as much as I've got older, I've had to reconcile myself that I sort of have that interest myself, that I wish I had some sort of nobler calling, but I can't help but be interested in why people do what they do, what incentivizes them, what drives them, what makes them make mistakes, how they need help, what they need. Those things interest me. I don't consciously have to work at that.
What would be a nobler calling?
Well, I think to be more involved in politics, to be more involved in academia, to be more involved in charities that I support, to do that stuff where it's not that I'm not involved in change, but the kind of change that people involved in drama are involved in is more subliminal, less concrete, more... One can't be sure, and one wouldn't want to be sure about how that changes people.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know that I agree. I mean, I agree with what you say about it being subliminal, but I don't think it's less noble necessarily. But as you say, if you know that it's noble, then you're probably doing something wrong. You want to set the hair running and then not know where it ends up.
I think I have a healthy kind. I'm always shocked by how interested people are in actors, and I've always been shocked at it. I said, why you should be more interested in the writers or the directors or the designers. And then as I've got older, I realise that in a sense, I think that interest in actors is not really about the actor. It's really about the fact that often the actors are the audience's representative in a story, that they are basically outsourcing their emotional life into an actor in a story, and they're interested about what happened to them while they were watching that story. How did that happen that I was with that person going through that experience? So I get it. I sort of get it. But at the same time, I think because I've lived with actors all my life, it feels very repetitive often what actors have got to say, which isn't often very elucidating.
That's why Mr. Burton's such a beautiful film, or such a special film, isn't it? Because it doesn't actually really focus on the actor. It focuses upon the Svengali. I mean, for want of a more positive word than Svengali, the role that P.H. Burton, Philip Burton, played in Richard Burton's life. It's a romance of sorts, really.
It definitely is. And what's interesting is that I think that friendship, that bond that you see being forged in that film, in a way, after the film ends, when you think that, Richard Jenkins, who's become Richard Burton by being adopted by Philip, you think, poor old Philip, I wonder what happened to him. And actually, this extraordinary expansion in his life afterwards. It's not the sort of classic story. He goes off and forms a drama school. He goes off and comes out in Florida. He has this amazing life and stays friends with Richard and outlives Richard substantially, but stays as a consultant to Richard all his life. So it's an amazing bond that they find in each other. They both find an escape from their circumstances, in a way. I
got goosebumps, but I looked it up last night, what happened to him afterwards, because it kind of ends with the sort of famous Henry V at Stratford that Anthony Quayle was directing. But I looked up what happened to P.H. Burton afterwards, and I got genuine goosebumps. I thought, oh, yes!
Yeah, me too. I was really... And weirdly, this sounds like a... Anthony Hopkins emailed me after he'd seen the film, and he said he knew Philip Burton as well because of this mad thing of Port Talbot being this hive of actors and extraordinary people. And he said that guy was just astonishing what he achieved, in that town, because he revolutionised people's lives. And I suppose going back to my father, it's that story as well,
of course,
of going from extreme poverty on this astral journey into a world you can't have dreamed of. My father used to describe the cinemas he grew up with. They were like palaces. You'd go in and you got a glimpse of some other world that you might be. And then Burton and my father, they became part of that world.
Yeah, there's the path not taken as well, isn't it? It's that sort of... That has made all the difference. The idea that they were both on rails in a way, and somehow they managed to get off the rails. In Burton's case, by dint of Philip's intervention. In your dad's case, by dint of this girlfriend, this visionary girlfriend.
Exactly.
And if it hadn't happened, then they'd have stayed on the rails, so to speak, in life. Because you've already used the word ambivalent about the prospect of becoming an actor. You've described how that you found the insecurity quite frightening, I think, if that's the right word. But reading what I've managed to glean of your life, If I were writing a script about your life, it would be typified as you running away from your destiny for much of the early years.
Yeah, that may be true. I think what happened is that I went to university thinking I'm going to become a director. I'm going to read and study and have good fun. It wasn't kind of austere, but I was going to learn about how texts are operated and become a director. And I think as part of that time in Manchester, so many things happened to me at Manchester in the early 80s, or in the mid-80s when I was there, not least a sort of political awakening, not least a sort of a sense of what's the point of doing these old plays? What do they add to society? There were very sort of fundamental, important questions that were being asked by my fellow students. There had been the Revolutionary Communist Party. One of the tutors had in the department had left the year before me, and his legacy was that the whole department had been radicalised in such a way that sort of you weren't just putting on plays, you were having to sort of rigorously defend any cultural decision you made and how it would be adding to the progressive forces in society. And at the time it was very intimidating to arrive in that atmosphere as a student. And I look back on it as being so invaluable because the rigour and the scrutiny with which you made decisions made you question texts in ways that I hadn't been expecting to question at all. And it was the time of Clause 28, and it was the time of the miners' strike, and it was the time of Viraj Mendes holding out in a chapel in Moss Side. And the drama department and people in the drama department were very much involved in political campaigns outside of the department. So anyway, there I was coming to university thinking I was going to, do Shakespeare and Beckett and all of this stuff. And clearly that wasn't the order of the day. What the order of the day was making your own stuff, making it urgent and relevant. And as a result of that, a lot of our seminars at university often came to the same conclusion week after week, was that the current theatre was dead and what was the point of it and the future lay elsewhere. And gradually, as you got older and you got better informed, you realised that there were counter-arguments. But towards the end of that, I came across this drama school where I went to subsequently in Paris, where I didn't have to make a decision about whether I wanted to be a director, an actor, a designer, a producer. You did all of it. You're a writer. You made theatre. It was a training in theatre making. And the actor, as in the original actors who pull carts around, they did the whole thing. They were producers, actors, directors. They weren't waiting for work. They were making it. And in fact, the tremendous sense of impetus you got from this school as you left it was, you will never be unemployed.
Okay.
You will make work. If there is not work, you will make it because that's what you have been equipped to do.
This is Lecoq. This is a famous school, but also a famously rigorous training. But I sense that you embraced that wholeheartedly. Yeah,
I think, James, when you're writing my biography, you might want to put a chapter in about this, where I say, I think that training, I casually say that I use it every day of my life, but I sort of do because it gave me such incredible skills to observe and a language with which to talk about movement and change and drama, and to use those tools. It was the most extraordinary 2 years of my life.
How did you find out about it when you say you stumbled
I
across
saw little
it?
companies doing it. Complicité had just started, Theatre de Complicité, and they'd started. And little companies who had been formed at the school would tour to the green room that was then open in Manchester. And you'd see, and I read a little bit. Huh?
On Whitworth Street.
Yeah, that's it.
I've performed there.
Have you?
Yeah,
what did you do?
We'll do that another day. I gave them my Real Inspector Hound many moons ago.
Excellent. Great play.
It is a great play. So you knew about it, but you also had this drive to go. I mean, a lot of people at Manchester in that era, well, at all training schools in that era would have perhaps heard of it, but not got their act together to actually go for 2 years. It speaks of a seriousness in approach to the craft.
Oh yeah, I know, and that intensified there. I think a sense of what you want from further education, which is a sense of vocation, a sense of that. Yeah. That's what you get from further education. Like if you're lucky enough to find what it is you want to do, here's a way to do it. Here's a set of values with which to do it, and here's an outlook, and we're going to treat it in a way that you can value, not sort of. I'm sure people got it from British drama schools. It's just that I think I wanted to study with people from different cultures, which you did. It's an international school. And I wanted to study with him because he had his own agenda. Mm. And it was way better than I could have expected. Even though there were shocks. I mean, it was obviously a kind of casual decision because on the first day I remember they said, so now we've got acrobatics. And I remember going, we've got what? Acrobatics. We've got acrobatics. And they said, yeah, didn't you read the prospectus? I said, no, I read about the writing and the improvising and the devising, not the acrobatics.
So there's a slow chipping away then at the determination not to be an actor, and this is the final part of that process is in Paris, because even as you left Manchester you could have been a playwright or a director. Or let's just back up a bit, back to school, but still in Oxford at Abingdon School. Did it begin there? Did you because you kept getting drawn back to the school plays, didn't you? And it's presumably the amount of pleasure you got out of it must have been a fairly significant part of this process. Yeah,
at my school, the people who did plays, again, were people you sort of wanted to hang around with. They were people, I'm sure it's the same at your school.
Up to a point, we had rugby as a religion, sadly. The acting different. Was
But the cool kids were all doing drama, and you sort of wanted to hang around with them. And also, in a way, the cool teachers were directing the plays, and you sort of wanted to hang around with them. And there were interesting things. There were little nights where you could put on your own little tiny bits of writing at school, and I think that they played on my mind. And I think, as with the music that I was getting into at the time, music was a big part of it, and of just going, I want to be part of culture. Whatever I do, I want to be part of culture. And the school, to give it its due, did encourage that. Radiohead, that band, were all at my school. And as much as they rage against the school, they don't rage against the music department. No. They talk about how much they were introduced to different ways of thinking about music by the music teacher. So I think that at that time, it was an interesting school, the kind of people who were there.
I don't know why the word value keeps popping into my head as you speak. You really want what you do to have value, don't you? And this approach to the training is about searching for the stuff that has value, I think.
Yeah, I got asked recently, because of the kind of projects that I've been doing recently, I think they asked this question. They said, does everything have to have a political dimension? Which is kind of course, it doesn't.
I don't mean that.
No, but what I would say is in terms of value, I think it needs to be moving things forward. It needs to be adding to culture rather than just sort of leaving culture flat. And I think that often stuff that I might get sent, if something I've already done, there is a sense of, I could do that, but in a way I'd like to have as rich a different kind of culture that I could have, because that would make it valuable to me.
Well, I was thinking of value to you, as in it's going to make me grow, or I'm going to get something out of it that I haven't found before.
Well, I have this opportunity that I've been given, that I'm being given, and I'm incredibly fortunate. We don't need to go into the stats of it,
sure.
But I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate, and to grow older specifically as a man, I would say, to nurture one's curiosity and childlikeness, not childishness, which is the bad side of being an actor, but childlike, a kind of childlike wonder that one wants to keep as one gets older. It's a value that one wants to keep. I think that's that kind of stuff. My job gives me access to that. My job can give me access to a delight in the world that I see with my friends in other jobs. There's a kind of just a slight retreat into what they know rather than what might be possible. that's just a thing of aging. And I think I have an opportunity in my job to choose a slightly different path that I think I see women more than men able to do throughout their lives. That I may be hazarding a guess there.
No, definitely. I can see what you mean. For people who've just sort of woken up from a coma, we should probably mention that part of the reason why you'd be associated with political parts is because of the success of Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, in which he played Mr. Bates. And he just got his payoff last week.
Yeah, I'm here to tell you that whatever was reported is totally not true. I spoke to Alan. I said I was going to be meeting him. I said, what needs to be corrected, Alan? He said, well, what I was awarded was nothing like what they've reported I was awarded.
Oh, really?
And he said, and don't forget to remind them that there's at least 100 of the original 555 who still haven't received anything. And it's a great source of disappointment to me that when people come up and thank me for what I supposedly did, which I didn't, I was just in a show about it, but they go, well done, and you go, yeah, and I go, I just should tell you that it's not over.
Yeah, of course.
The show's over, the struggle is not over, and people continue to die without getting their money back, and it's such an appalling scandal, and I hate to put a down on it, but it would be great to go, the show changed things. And it did, but it'll only have changed things when those people get their blooming money back.
That's interesting. I'll get back to that on the radio then, because there was a sense in last week's reporting of a full stop being applied, and obviously that's not something that
no, and there are people very interested to make that happen.
Of course they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave it with me. I tell you a question. I hope you don't mind me asking. In that, given that your father sort of fell into it, essentially, how did he respond to your very serious approach to training and to craft and to fine honing your talent?
I think he treated it far more seriously than other actors I met, in the sense that he, as I sort of implied, I think when he went to drama school in England, aged 29 or something, he couldn't believe what was on offer to him. And I think it, as I say, I think it saved his mental health. I think it saved his life. And he was forever grateful. At the same time, the romance that he had of just being able to say he was an actor was very different from mine, because I sort of had to find my own relationship with it. He was pretty practical about it with me. He said, occasionally people would tell, maybe Toby, when I was younger, maybe he'd like to come and be in this professional production. He said, no, it was the only thing he was really stipulated. He said, I don't think you should do that. I think you should study. I think you should see that out. And he was pretty clear about that. And then he also said, it wasn't that he was disappointed that I became an actor, not at all. But I think he said, you need to be really clear about what limitations may be put on you by your appearance. That actors go into it thinking, I could play anything. David's talked about this, David Harewood. He came out of drama school going, I can play anything. And suddenly he was a black actor. Suddenly I was a short actor. And that sense of being conditioned by people's gaze is a fundamental issue for actors that they have to be aware of and try and resist and find to negotiate in such a way that you don't become trapped by it. Find a way to not become trapped by it. But then there are actors who are perfectly happy to do that.
So the Lecoq training would have been particularly helpful in that field, in that front.
Exactly, yeah.
And that comes to an end in 91. You head back to Britain
with my theatre company.
With your theatre company that centres around Battersea, around the Arts Centre in Battersea.
Right. Yeah.
And you are doing the kind of theatre that you wanted to do.
We're doing very physical device theatre that we make that's based on things we go out and watch and research. And with your barrel, so wheeling your barrel around South Well, we had
London.
actually learnt all of that stuff about how to do a play on a little platform and all of that. So all of that amazing language that we'd been given, and we were keen to do it, and going to the Edinburgh Festival, all the things you'd expect, and then touring and subsequently making shows that toured the world a bit and living that side of it, which I'm now really grateful that I had that sort of 10-year period. Also because a lot of the people I met during that period have subsequently been subsumed into the mainstream.
Right.
And we all had this, when you read about, an artistic scene in history where, there's all this group of artists gathered in Pont-Aven in the south of France making these paintings like no one else was making them. I'm not trying to over-romanticize it, but there were a lot of people in their early 20s in little companies able to live on unemployment benefit, able to get housing benefit, making shows, going to see each other's shows, talking what was wrong with your friend's show, what was right, arguing how this was, and a little culture around Battersea Art Centre developed, I would say, in the early 90s, that when I look back on it now, was so reassuring and so consoling, because no one in the world needed our work. No one needed it, but we all needed to believe that we were sort of going to be changing the theatrical culture.
How do you know you're good, Toby?
Well, if someone pays you money to do it, they're saying you can do. We believe you can do a job. I think as I get older, when someone comes to me with a part, said, "Would you like to play this part?" I don't find it getting any easier. I find it, if anything, getting harder. I just go. So much of my job is persuading myself that I could be that person, like literally become someone else. I have to do everything I can do to make that possible. That's sort of what my technique is. How do I persuade myself that I can be what they see that I can be? They see I can play that part. I don't see it. I've got to make a way, and that's sort of my job. Good, I don't know. I think good, ultimately, I don't want to be sort of too down on it, but I think if people have paid you and they continue to, and they ask you back to do it again,
and
that's a sign.
The phone keeps ringing. But what about in the moment? What about when you're on?
As I get older, I don't think you do.
Really?
I'm increasingly sceptical about actors who think they know when they've done a good show.
Gosh.
Who think they know when they've done a good scene.
Yeah.
Who look at the monitor and go, I mean, I think there's things you can change and alter a bit. But ultimately, it's a very strange thing to try and perceive yourself as others see you and assess what they've taken from something. In a theatre, you've got people at least in 180 degrees observing you from all of those different angles of each different seat.
Of course.
All have a totally different perspective on what you've done. All hearing it slightly differently. Yes. All understanding it at slightly different speeds. And then for you to come off and go, that was a good one. Yeah, you might feel that there was a tension in the room. That there was laughter when you expected to be laughter. That there was a gasp. And you think things are happening in that room, where things are changing in that room, an atmosphere is shifting. You might feel that, but in terms of your own particular performance, I feel I never want to look at the monitor after a scene. When I do watch myself, which I'm forced to do, I only see what I didn't do. I don't really see what I did do. I very rarely I go, wow, that really doesn't look like it felt to do. It felt so different to do that.
It's alchemy.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't make big claims for it, but I mean, I think it's people are very. I've been very lucky. People are very complimentary about my work, and I don't take it lightly, but I sort of forget it all the time.
So when and then how did you start getting subsumed into the mainstream? Straight out of Battersea.
Well, there were a couple of guys called Sean and Hamish who ran a company called The Right Size, who were a brilliant, brilliant company that I sort of worshipped, and I was a fan of the company. And they had a big hit. After about 15 years of work, they had a big hit, which won an Olivier Award, called Do You Come Here Often? A clown show based on the Brian Keenan book of An Evil Cradling, about two guys who get kidnapped and put in a room. Absolutely incredible show. And they were friends of mine. We'd worked together. doing little bits and pieces, and they said, "Oh, we've been asked to do a show about Morecambe and Wise, and we're a double act. It's going to be a show in which a double act get asked to do Morecambe and Wise, and one of them wants to do a tribute show to Morecambe and Wise, and the other one doesn't, and the thing becomes a tribute show to Morecambe and Wise in that dynamic. And we need someone to play all the other parts. Would you do that?" I said, "I don't think I would do that. I'd play someone who has to play all those parts rather than play all those parts." And they were very kind, and they created this character of Arthur, who people who know about Morecambe and Wise know there was a character going, "Not now, Arthur." Yeah. And this character called Arthur. David Pugh, the brilliant theatre producer, produced this show, and we had guest stars every night, like on the Morecambe and Wise show. And the show sort of became a runaway success and went to Broadway, as unlikely as that seemed. And I think at that point, people became more aware of me, not least in America, in New York, where there was a producer who came to see the first night in New York, and the show didn't do particularly well in New York. But he said, "There's a guy in this show who looks just like Truman Capote, and there's a script out there called, at that time it was called Every Word Is True, by a great late writer-director called Doug McGrath." And about 3 years after he'd seen me in that show, I was asked to screen test for that film, which subsequently became Infamous. Mm. The film was called Infamous. And infamously, there were two Truman Capote films at the same time. Yeah. But that, again, I think that those two events meant that there was an awareness of me that there hadn't been before, and I'd done little bits and bobs.
And so there wouldn't have been one without the other then, really? If
no,
that
absolutely
producer hadn't
not.
been in there that night to see it.
Yeah.
So where's that? Sort of turn of the millennium, roughly? Or
2000, so it goes to New York in 2003.
Yeah.
And then the Truman Capote film eventually gets made in 2005.
So there's a decade then before that
work
of enjoying
of being people who open doors in movie and point to heroes in the way he went that way, or having two pictures, or being, "My lady, here's your hat," or whatever it is.
Yes.
In kind of big Hollywood films. But being in a scene or two scenes or three scenes, and arriving in Prague and being driven off to a location, being there for 3 days, shooting a scene with Liam Neeson or whoever.
Yeah.
And that's subsidising your work on the fringe.
Well, which probably answers my next question, is about whether or not you found that frustrating, but you're getting your fulfilment from the fringe work.
Totally.
So this is just great in a way.
Yeah. It's like doing commercials at that time. There was, you could do a commercial and you could subsidise 4 months of working, doing your little theatre stuff at Battersea. Little only in the sense of the little economy.
I understand.
Massive in terms of ambition.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you used the word ambition, because did that ever kick in? Did you ever find yourself wanting to be not just having massive ambition, but to be on a massive stage? Did you have moments of thinking, I wonder, it would be nice, maybe one day?
I think it would be lying. I think it would just be lying to say that one wasn't ambitious. I'd love to be the kind of person who was full of, because I don't think my dad had that ambition at all. I think my dad was just grateful to be an actor. But no, I think it's to do with what your friends are doing in their lives, the challenges that they're having in their lives. As they get older, whatever profession they're in, if it's going well, they are taking on more responsibility. And I thought, I hope this job delivers me enough responsibility. I would like to have responsibility in my job. And I think in my late 20s, I did have like a lot of people do in their 20s. I see my kids are in their early 20s. And 20s is such a hard decade because everyone's progressing. Everyone's spat out of education and everyone's progressing at such different speeds. Some people are getting married. Some people even having kids. And other people are just unemployed. And some people are having to correct their dreams. And everyone's trying to do this. And it would be, I think that around about 28, 29, I certainly thought, if it's just going to be this, I think I will be frustrated. I've got a lot on my mind.
Okay.
And I like being very busy. I wonder if it's going to deliver. And fortunately, it did.
But it wasn't about baubles or unlocking achievements or status. It was about, again, feeling...
Well, status as an actor is an interesting one because I don't know that it's terribly helpful to think of one's status. In a way, being a tabula rasa is a far more interesting place to be.
Yes.
To constantly be starting at ground zero. And social status, that idea of... I was clear, it's not that I wanted a mortgage or anything like that. But I did sort of... My partner wasn't and isn't in the business at all.
Yeah.
But we were both feeling like we wanted to move things on.
Adulthood?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But while retaining the childlikeness.
Yeah.
Not the
which I still hope to have.
Yes, for sure. Well, so before you sort of get fired out of the canon of Infamous, there's a couple of interesting moments from that decade outside of the important work, the fringe work. I like the story. I hope it's true about Julia Roberts thinking that you were a genuinely weird fan.
Well, that is 100% true.
So you were supposed to be playing a weird fan.
Well, what happened was, I don't know if we've got the time. I'm not. This is the edited version. But around this time, as I say, these parts that you sort of got given because you've got an asymmetric face and because the people think you can handle it, that I got seen for the Notting Hill film. So I go in and I meet, and I have this nice audition with Richard Curtis and the late great Roger Michell, and it's a scene in a bookshop, and I do it, and he directs me, and I go, oh, that's brilliant direction. He just calibrated I went, oh, that's somebody who really knows that's proper directing. So I left the meeting thinking, oh, that's great. I won't get this part because it's too big. I won't get it. Anyway, so I didn't get the part, and then latterly, my agent rings up and said, there is a tiny part that they just need you, and they'd love you to play it for a day's work, playing a fan. I said, what do you mean, a fan? And they said, well, they're a bit worried that when Julia Roberts spills the orange juice on Hugh Grant's chest, and he invites her back to his house to clean up the dawning, as it were, of the romance in the film, she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't say yes. But if there was a fan there pestering her, she might do it. So I played the pestering fan. And so I went along, and it's this big budget movie, and I do it, and everyone's charming, and Hugh's charming, and Julia Roberts is a little bit. I'd chosen a costume that I thought a pestering fan might wear, whatever a pestering fan looks like, and I think she looked at me, and I was a very, very convincing pestering fan, and as a result, she was wary of me and wouldn't give me my cue for my pathetic 3 lines or whatever. So we'd do takes, and I'd never get my cue, and I'd look at Roger and he'd go, oh, sorry, I'll tell him to give you a cue. Because I think he was already thinking of cutting it, because I think he already knew that wasn't necessary. And indeed, it was cut. But subsequently, so many strange things happened about that day. At one point, I left the set to have a cup of tea, and they wouldn't let me back on because they thought I was a pestering fan. At one point, they kept giving me all the photos that they'd taken of me in the different costumes. They were literally extinguishing the fact that I'd ever been mentioned in as even possibly being in the film. And then the film came out, and then people said claiming to see me in the film. So I started speculating about why that might be, and I thought maybe I'm reflected in Julia Roberts' dark sunglasses on the take they took of that. And out of it, I made a show which was called Missing Reel, about the reel of film that I'd had. But it was also talking about that stage of my life, about the fact that in the very room and at the very crossroads where we'd shot the film was where I used to sit reading Loot and looking for flats.
Wow.
That we could possibly rent and buy. So, and that was where we were sitting on the day of the movie in that same cafe. So the whole thing had a sort of vaguely occultish feel that I turned into a show. And Richard Curtis very kindly agreed to show that I could show the scene at the end of the show, the theatre show. So we showed it, and people would come and go, "So that really happened?" I go, "Well, I wouldn't make that up. I mean, it's
I love that. That's kind of like the perfect. I don't know. It's as if that is that show, Missing Reel, is the collision of your two lives, isn't it? It's a perfect kind of punctuation mark.
Yeah, it's trying to make a positive out of what could have been a big negative.
All of which makes it quite remarkable that they cast you in Infamous, really.
It was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. I didn't know anything about Truman Capote. When I came back from America from a play what I wrote, my agent at the time said, look, there's this great script. Sean Penn's reading it at the moment and Johnny Depp, but I think you'd be perfect for the part. And I literally went, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? So the script came along and she said, just read it. I read it, and as is the way when you have no status as an actor and you read a great script, you start reading it and you go, oh no, it's really good. It's really, really good. It's, for those people who don't know, it's about, much like the film Capote, it's about the writing of Capote's masterpiece in a way, In Cold Blood. And it's the story of him going to Kansas and researching that with Harper Lee. And the script was great. It started off as a tragic story. It started off as a sort of comic light film and then sort of pivoted into this very tragic story, which pointed towards the rest of Capote's life subsequently.
And it was, I mean, it changed everything, really.
Well, I think it did. I think that little period before it came out and before Capote came out, that changed everything because while there was sort of talk that I'd done an amazing job, what Americans call an amazing job, I could get an American agent and people on the back of the potential of it being an amazing film would give me access to other work. And so I made about 2 or 3 films before it came out.
And now you are moving into the realms of where people recognise you and sort of stop you in the street and...
Maybe, not so much. I think people recognise, I don't know what other actors have said to you, I think mainly it's TV, not film.
Is it? But you are being offered scripts that are feeding that.
Yeah, which are just incredible, great, like working with Oliver Stone on W, working with Ron Howard on Frost Nixon. These films are coming in and I've realised I'm very, very interested in film acting. I think largely because I never assumed it would happen. Right. I never thought I would do it. And I realised that it allows me to act in such a detailed way that that the stage becomes obviously the camera. And I'm so fascinated by the restriction of it and by the learning this new thing. And it becomes a sort of surge of new interest to me, really.
But by detail, you mean that something tiny gets massively magnified in a way that on a stage it
broadly
might not
speaking,
be
I'd say that whereas on stage, you go to the audience. Yes. Because as I said, the audience are all sitting in with different perspectives. Anything that you do has to be registered by everyone. Yeah. However high or wide the stage is. Whereas in film, the audience come to you. Anything you do, you do. So there isn't you don't need to signal in the way that you have to on stage. There's an element of flagging. There's no way, unless you're in a tiny theatre, studio theatre. But in those stages, like we're doing Othello, there's no other way to make the audience aware of where they should look and what they should be taking from what they look at.
You sound surprised to have enjoyed the film acting as much as you do. If that's
it's
surprised to be doing it, but also surprised at what it offered, the type of acting it let you do.
I was surprised that how much I enjoyed it. I think that doing Capote first, playing that part, and the sheer fear of playing an American icon meant that I immersed myself. The film, they realised that they had an unknown to play it, and this was a sort of tragic thing that happened with the other film. The other film overtook us as a result because they had Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Capote in that. They realised they had none, so they knew they felt they knew that they had to cluster me with very, very well-known actors, not least Sandra Bullock playing Harper Lee. And that took time.
Right.
during that time, I literally, in a way that I only have ever been able to do in a film lead role, was able to immerse myself in how on earth I was going to get Truman's voice, how I was going to get his body language, how I was going to write like him, I could literally become someone else. There was enough time to do that. And that thrill that you can do on film, that sense of total transformation, the illusion of that, but the kind of dream of that was really, really engaging to me.
I can see why. I mean, it's a bit of a show. You've mentioned it a couple of times. It's a bit of a showbiz parable, isn't it? Or at least a film industry parable. That performance was extraordinary and incredibly well received. And then Sod's Law, another film comes along with someone famous in it, exploring almost identical territory. It's just insane, really. And there's absolutely nothing. I mean, presumably it smarted a bit at the time.
What smarted, I think, was I could never not be grateful for what that film did to me and the people I met as a result, and the great people who worked on that film. And just as we've discussed, the extraordinary thing to be plucked out of British theatre into America. We shot it in Texas, and suddenly I'm playing this American, and just the scale of the challenge. So I never had any feeling of disappointment at all. I did for the director who had taken the plunge in casting me, and who'd written such a beautiful script, and who believed in it so much. And over the course of a weekend, he realised that the film was going to die in the cinema. It's subsequently the quality of his screenplay, the quality of Bruno Delbonnel's cinematography, the quality of the other performances has meant that the film, in a way that films can nowadays, has an ongoing life, being rediscovered, which is of huge satisfaction to me.
Yes.
And I know in his lifetime was for Doug as well.
Good. You presumably could have. There would have been quite a lot to choose from when it came to a sort of triumphant return to the stage. Why did you pick Iago
this time?
Yeah,
it's on a very short list of things that I've wanted to do. I'm very interested in shifts of tone, dark shifts of tone. I love Pinter. Pinter I discovered when I was a 14-year-old, and I've just read everything that Pinter ever wrote. And about 8 years ago, I did The Birthday Party on stage. And Iago, in a way, the scenes between Iago and Othello are like little Pinter plays. They are little. I mean, they're magnificent writing, but it's kind of within the overall tragedy, there is this awful planting of jealousy and menace and emotional violence going on for no apparent reason as you get in Pinter. And those two scenes, in a way, were the scenes that drew me to the part. It also terrified me because I haven't done Shakespeare on stage for about 20 years, and it was in time to be terrified again. And so that was the reason.
I'm really interested in that, given what you said earlier about wanting to know why people do things, and your parents having conversations with your school friends about them and because of all the parts, it's the one that you can't. And Coleridge called it motiveless malignancy. It's motiveless. Yeah. So for an actor, especially an actor who's just spent an hour explaining to us what it is you love about the job, this should, in a way, have been the last part on earth that you wanted to
Well, there's things, aren't there? I mean, for those people who don't know, Iago, other characters do speak to the audience.
Yes.
Momentarily. Iago constantly talks to the audience, and he's, in a way, based on an old medieval tradition of the vice character, who is a sort of, as the name would suggest, a sort of comic villain who can talk to the audience. When I read the play, I think my function, this isn't to say why he does it, but my function is to compromise the audience, is to make the audience, because they sort of have me as a kind of representative, because I keep telling them what I'm going to do. That they go, oh, he's going to do that, and they find themselves laughing at the most appalling things, and in a sense, that darkness, they get implicated in that. Now, that doesn't tell you why he does it, because my own feeling, talking to Tom, the director, what makes it relevant, I suppose, is there is a sense of, in our production of a lot of talk about the manosphere and a lot of talking about loss of agency, that something happens. He says in the very first speech of the play, he talks about how he's been neglected for promotion. Then they find they're going to war. Then the war doesn't happen. And I think he turns the war into a domestic project that he's going to get, and he finds this thrill of agency that he can make things happen by deceiving people that he's honest. And I think that sort of pernicious force, he gets a sense of his own agency from that. And I know that people have talked to me about, wow, I never thought about laughing as much as I laughed in it. And they go, should I be laughing? I go, well, that's not really a question for me. I'm not playing it for laughs. I'm certainly not playing it for laughs. But I think the irony of it and the anxiety in the audience, I suspect, is what generates the laughter. Yeah. And it's structured a bit like a comedy because no one knows everything except Iago.
I loved it.
Oh, did you? Good.
I mean, just transported me, to be honest. And it's not happened to me at Othello before.
Great.
I've had it with other plays.
I'm so pleased because we wanted it to be like a thriller, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just magnificent. And it is on at the Haymarket until middle of January, is it?
January 17th, yeah. So
go and see it. Mr. Burton is available on BBC iPlayer.
That's right.
As we speak. That's a beautiful film. Do you know, we've talked about ambition a bit. I think the last actor sitting in that chair was Charles Dance. And I asked him at the end of the interview if he had any boxes left unticked. And he said, I'd love to carry a film. I'd love to be the lead in a film. You've already done that. You've done it a few times.
Yeah.
Do you have any boxes left unticked?
Well, as I mentioned, I think each time I do it, and I don't think this is affectation, I think I've become more and more aware as I get older of the challenge, the basic contract of you become this other person for the purposes of this job. I find the work of persuading myself that I can transform myself, that a good challenge to grow older with, the skills required to do that. Did you mention the hack when I played Alan Rusbridger? Alan Rusbridger is 6'3". I don't know, 6'3". He has a very healthy head of hair. It's sort of so dark brown it's almost black. He wears spectacles. He's the definition of erudition. He's quietly spoken, very modest. He couldn't be less like I am. And when I was invited to play him, and he's a sort of hero of mine, because of the way he carries himself and because of his modesty and humility and just his acuity, I suppose. And I met him and I said, I'm really sorry. They've asked me to play you. And he was charming about the whole thing. But there you see, there you go. I was so honoured to play him. I couldn't be less like him. And so the challenge there, if I could grow up with challenges, keep going with challenges like that, those are all boxes to be ticked. They're all kind of things that, you come out and go away with it again.
Toby Jones, thank you.
Thank you. It's been surprisingly enjoyable.
Well, I'll take that. I'll take that as a win.